Hello everyone. Welcome to another episode of SpeakNest English Podcast Zone. This is episode 47, and today, we are going to learn how to give directions and describe locations in English. If you've ever been lost, or someone asked you, "Excuse me, how do I get to?" This episode is for you. Let's begin.
Okay, let's dive deep.
Ready.
So, the material you shared, it really zeroes in on something that feels almost basic. Giving directions, explaining places in English. And our mission today, really pulling from this source, is to unpack the why. Like, why does the source argue this is so important in the real world?
It's interesting, yeah, because the source doesn't just, brush it off. It puts it right out there saying mastering directions is, essential, a practical life skill.
Right.
It's not just framed as, language homework. It's about actually navigating the world. It's helping other people do it, too.
Exactly. And it grounds this in really specific situations, things we can all relate to. It's not just theory.
Right, like helping a tourist, that classic scenario the source mentions.
Yeah.
Someone's lost, maybe feeling a bit stressed, and, just being able to give clear directions in English, that immediately solves the problem.
Creates a connection, too.
Definitely. It's a direct application,
Yeah.
Immediate impact.
But it's not only about strangers, right? The source also brings up guiding people you actually know.
Oh, yeah. Friends coming over to your place for the first time, maybe colleagues finding the office.
You need to get them there efficiently without them getting frustrated.
And that means clarity, doesn't it? Using landmarks, sequencing things properly. The source implies that need for real clarity.
Which then raises this other point about practical use beyond just, casual help. Jobs.
Yes. The source is specific here. It calls out certain field.
Like customer service, tourism.
Logistics, absolutely. Even delivery services. In those jobs, clear communication about location isn't just nice to have.
It's fundamental.
It really is. It's key to doing the job right, avoiding mistakes, delays, that kind of thing.
Okay, so here's where the source makes a point that I found quite compelling. The personal angle. It argues that being able to explain places clearly, it doesn't just help the other person. It makes you sound helpful and, really importantly, confident.
Yeah, and if we connect that back to the bigger picture the source seems to be painting, mastering this kind of very practical communication, it genuinely builds confidence.
You mean not just in your English skills?
Not just English, no. Confidence in your ability to sort of interact with the world around you, to solve little problems, to present yourself as, capable,
Right.
assured.
So it suggests even these seemingly basic skills add up.
They contribute significantly, to that overall feeling of competence. That's the idea coming through.
So pulling this all together from the source material, what does this really mean for you, the listener? It suggests that working on explaining directions makes you a better communicator day to day.
Potentially better at your job, too, in certain roles.
And, maybe surprisingly, it can give a real boost to how confident you feel, both in your interactions and, your command of English overall.
Exactly. The core takeaway, the thing your source really drives home, is that giving directions might feel basic, but its practical importance is pretty far-reaching.
It impacts simple helpfulness, professional stuff, personal confidence.
Right. It's a good reminder, really, that fundamental communication skills often have the biggest real-world payoff.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, here's something to think about. Building on what your source says about helpfulness and confidence.
Okay.
How might actively focusing on a seemingly small skill, like explaining where things are, not only change how you help others find their way, but also significantly shape your own sense of confidence when you communicate in general? Something to consider. We're getting into something really practical, something we all do, or will try to do, giving directions and explaining places in English.
And we're going a bit beyond just, the absolute basics here.
Exactly.
This deep dive is based on various materials that really focus on how this works in practice. So our mission, basically, is to pull out the really useful stuff, not just the words you probably know, like left and right, but those key phrases, the little nuances the sources show, make communication, clearer, more confident, whether you're the one giving directions or trying to figure them out yourself.
Right. Because knowing left from right is one thing, but actually getting someone there without confusion or not getting lost yourself, that's different.
Totally different.
So let's unpack what these sources say helps us move past just that simple level.
Okay. Well, what's interesting is how the sources pretty much immediately build on those basics. Left, right, straight, turn. They really emphasize combining those movement words with how far to go and, crucially, what landmarks to look out for.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. So, like, what specific phrases keep coming up in the materials for combining the movement and the distance part?
Well, one thing that's really consistent is using words like for and until, simple structure words. So things like go straight for about 2 blocks, or maybe keep walking until you see the big red building.
Okay.
It's not just go straight. It gives you a specific target or duration.
Right. That little for or until adds so much needed context. Did the sources flag any, like, common mix-ups with the movement words?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. Several sources pointed out the confusion between, say, turn at the bank versus turn after the bank. Seems small, but it causes real problems.
I can see that.
Yeah, so the sources stress using really precise language there. If you mean after passing it, maybe say something clearer, like go past the bank and then take the next left.
Ah, okay, that's a great example from the sources. That tiny word shift really changes the whole picture. So we've got movement.
Mm-hmm.
What about describing where something actually is? Location. How do the sources approach that?
Right. So this is where those location words, behind, in front of, next to, across from, on the corner of, this is where they become really, really useful, especially when you combine them. The sources often emphasize giving more than one cue if you can.
Okay, can you give an example, maybe a bit more detailed than just, I don't know, the shop is next to the library?
Sure. Okay, one scenario that came up involved on the corner of.
Mm-hmm.
The sources suggest making it clear which corner. Like, is it on the corner opposite the big supermarket, or maybe on the corner next to the park entrance? Or even combining cues. The cafe you want is across from the main post office, right next to that old bookshop. Using across from usually implies, directly opposite, maybe over a street. Next to means right beside it. These small distinctions, the sources show, they really cut down on confusion.
Yeah, that level of detail pulled from how people actually use these phrases according to the sources.
Mm-hmm.
That really shows the value here. It's not just memorizing a word list. It's about knowing how to piece them together effectively.
Exactly. That's really the core takeaway from digging into these sources. Mastering these basic phrases isn't just about vocabulary. It's understanding those sort of simple grammatical structures and the common little traps, pitfalls that make directions clear or, well, really confusing.
Right.
It's about building your confidence, knowing you can help someone who's relying on your words to find their way.
So for you listening, what this really boils down to is focusing on how to combine these elements effectively. Like the sources show. Movement plus distance or a landmark, using multiple location clues, watching out for those tiny word confusions like at versus after or past.
Mm-hmm.
Doing that gives you the ability to communicate directions much, much more clearly and feel more confident doing it.
Yeah, it's turning those simple building blocks into instructions that actually work reliably.
Absolutely. So here's something to think about, kind of building on what these sources suggest. Consider the difference between just vaguely pointing down a street versus giving directions that are so clear you can almost picture the journey yourself as you say them.
Yeah.
How much easier does that make things for everyone? And, how much more of the world could you explore if you really understand those specific ways of phrasing directions that the sources highlight? It's quite powerful, actually. A deep dive into something really practical, almost like a real-world skill.
Definitely.
It's all about how to give directions, how to explain places clearly in English. We've been looking at source material focused specifically on this.
That's right.
And our mission really is to pull out those core phrases, the ones the source says you really need to know.
The essentials.
Exactly. So you feel totally ready, to help someone find their way.
Yeah, it's something that comes up more often than you'd think.
Totally. I mean, think about it. Maybe you're trying to meet someone or just guiding a visitor, even down your own street. Clear directions, they just make everything easier.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And this source, it argues it's not about complex grammar or vocab.
Yeah.
It's about mastering the right simple tools, the effective ones.
Okay, so let's look at those tools. Pulling these straight from our source material, these are the specific phrases it really highlights is the building blocks.
The key ones.
Yeah, the source picked them for a reason. It starts, pretty simply. Fundamental movement. Go straight ahead.
Can't get much clearer than that.
Right. The source likes it because it just cuts out any ambiguity right away, sets the path.
Uh-huh.
Then, handling turns. This is crucial. The source really pushes for clarity here, suggests things like take the second left.
Or the first right, obvious.
Exactly. And what the source points out is that counting the turns or streets second, First, that's way less confusing than just saying turn left up ahead or something vague.
Gives a definite marker. Makes sense.
Then, pinpointing the actual place. The source's favored for this seems to be, it's on your right.
Simple, direct, uses the listener's own perspective.
Yeah, or, it's on your left. Easy.
But it gets more interesting with landmarks, I thought.
Oh, absolutely. The source adds real value there. It pushes for using specific locations, spatial relationships. The example it gives is great. You'll see a supermarket, it's opposite that.
Right. Using words like opposite, next to, behind.
Yeah. The source notes that linking it to something visible, something known, using those specific terms, that's much stronger than just saying it's near the supermarket.
It provides a solid reference point, much better.
And what about getting a sense of, how far scale?
Yes. The source suggests using time, which is often, easier to grasp than distance units, maybe.
Like it's 5 minutes from here.
Exactly. Grounds the journey in something relatable for pretty much anyone.
Okay, and one last key bit. Identifying stopping points or markers along the way.
Guiding them to the next step.
Yeah. The source advises guiding someone until they reach a clear point, like walk down this street until you reach the signal.
Or a specific shop, or maybe a park entrance, a clear landmark.
Right, so those are the core phrases the source really singles out. But, this deep dive isn't just about listing phrases.
Yeah.
What's really interesting and what the source goes into is why. Why these simple phrases work so well. What's the thinking there, according to the source?
Well, that's the fascinating part, isn't it? The source actually calls these polite and helpful phrases anyone can understand. It's framing them not just as words, but as a communication strategy.
Okay, a strategy. How so?
Because they minimize the cognitive load, the thinking effort for the person asking. Imagine you're a bit lost, maybe stressed.
Yeah, definitely.
Complex sentences, obscure words, they just won't help, might even confuse things more. These simple phrases cut through that.
Right, they're direct and easy to process.
Exactly. Which leads to a really important question for you, the listener. Why should knowing these specific simple phrases, the ones the source highlights, why should that matter to you?
What's the takeaway?
The source suggests it boils down to confidence and capability. Knowing these turns a potentially awkward moment, someone asking you for help, into a chance where you can step up, confidently assist.
Okay, so it's about feeling prepared.
Prepared and helpful. The source basically argues that giving clear, easily understood directions is a fundamental skill. It builds a little bit of trust, makes you feel more comfortable, more useful, whether you're at home or somewhere new.
It avoids that fumbling feeling.
Precisely. It's the difference between kind of mumbling and pointing vaguely and actually guiding someone effectively.
Smooths the interaction.
Yeah. So as you think about these really practical tools from our source material today, here's something to consider, a final thought maybe.
Go on.
How could mastering these simple phrases, these very basic ways of literally pointing someone in the right direction, how could that actually be a surprisingly powerful way to do more than just navigate streets?
Meaning?
Could it also be a way to build small connections, maybe feel a bit more capable, a bit more grounded whenever you encounter new places or even new people?
Today on, a really fundamental communication skill, giving directions in English.
Yeah, it sounds simple, right? But getting it right, making it clear, that's often the tricky part.
Absolutely. So we've looked at quite a bit of source material on this, and our mission basically is to pull out the key insights, specifically how to help people find their way using landmarks.
Because, just listing street names or counting blocks, that can go wrong so easily. Someone misses a sign, loses count.
Oh, definitely. Been there.
Yeah. And the sources we looked at, they really zero in on why landmarks are such a powerful tool here.
Exactly. And that's why this dive is hopefully really valuable for you. If you can understand how to use landmarks effectively based on what this material suggests, well, your directions are just going to be dramatically clearer.
It's like giving someone visual breadcrumbs almost, not just auditory instructions they have to hold in their head.
Right. And the core idea right up front from the source material is that landmarks, and they define these pretty specifically as like well-known buildings or signs, they fundamentally change how easy directions are to follow.
They're like anchors, concrete anchors in, what might be an unfamiliar space for the person.
Anchors, yes, that's a great way to put it. Instead of just abstract stuff, go left and right, you're pointing to something real, something general. The source material suggests this actually reduces the cognitive load,
Ah, okay. So it's less about remembering a sequence like left, right, second,
Yeah,
left,
likely.
and more about just like looking for that big church or the bright red post box.
Precisely. The material implies spotting something familiar, something you've been told to look for, is just, well, simpler than constantly processing spatial info and counting things. You're scanning for a known thing.
Right, not trying to build this complex mental map from scratch while you're also walking and looking around.
Makes sense.
And the sources then offer some really practical language examples, right? Simple ways to actually use these landmarks in your sentences.
Yes, they do. Stuff like, it's near the big shopping mall. Simple, direct.
Or you'll see it right next to the hospital.
Hmm.
It works because it links the place they want to something hopefully quite prominent and recognizable.
Mm-hmm. And it's not just near or next to. The source material gives variations too, like it's behind the cinema.
Or go past the petrol station and it's on your left. So it's about the relationship, the position relative to that landmark.
That's a really key distinction the source makes, actually. Not just that the landmark exists, but where your destination is in relation to it. There's a good example in there, like the library is behind the police station next to the school.
Oh, yeah, I remember that. See how that layers it? You're using two potential points of reference, the police station and the school.
Right, both probably well known.
Yeah, to kind of triangulate the location of the library, it provides more certainty than just one reference point.
It really does paint more of a picture, doesn't it? And it all hinges on those well-known buildings or signs, as the source puts it, using the visible environment to simplify navigation.
So connecting back to the source's main point, it's about giving people these points of certainty. When you see the landmark, you get that little confirmation, okay, I'm on the right track.
Reduces anxiety, probably. Gives you confidence.
Exactly. You know roughly where you are relative to where you're going.
Okay, so let's try and bring this together. The practical takeaway from the material seems pretty straightforward, but powerful. Use landmarks. Ground your directions in things people can actually see.
Yeah, it reinforces that core function the sources talk about. Using these specific, well-known references it works better, helps people find their way more successfully than just relying on street names or distances alone.
It seems almost deceptively simple when you lay it out like that, doesn't it? Find a known thing, say where your target is relative to it.
Yeah.
But there's that key phrase from the source again, well known.
Mm-hmm. That's the bit that maybe needs a little more thought, building on the material. It defines landmarks as well-known buildings or signs.
Right. So what happens if your landmark, the thing you think is well known?
Isn't actually known at all to the person asking? Maybe they're new to the area, or they just don't know that particular building you call the big red one.
Or maybe they don't know the local term, like maybe they call a petrol station, a gas station, or something else entirely.
Exactly. So how does that reality, that potential mismatch in known landmarks, challenge the simple effectiveness that the source material highlights?
Yeah, it adds a layer of complexity, doesn't it? Definitely
Yeah.
something to chew on next time you're asked, excuse me, how do I get to?
Common. Giving directions. How to do it well.
Right. It seems so simple, doesn't it?
It does, but it can go wrong easily. Our source today is just a really short role play, basically. Someone asking for the railway station.
Mm-hmm. Just a quick exchange.
Exactly. And our mission, sort of, is to unpack that little conversation, see what secrets it holds for actually helping someone find their way.
Yeah, because we've all been there, haven't we? Getting directions that just, leave you more confused than when you started.
Or giving them and wondering if the person actually found the place. So this simple dialogue, it's like a mini masterclass.
It really is. It's got all the core stuff packed in tight.
Okay, so in the role play, someone asks for directions, and the immediate response is key, isn't it?
Yeah, the first word, sure.
Just sure.
What's the power there?
Well, it's instant confirmation. It says, yep, I heard you, I can help. It kind of puts the asker at ease right away, establishes a connection. Okay, good start. Then the actual direction giving begins. First bit, go straight.
Uh-huh. But crucially, not just go straight. It adds for 2 blocks.
Right. Why is that 2 blocks part so important?
Because go straight is, well, it's potentially endless, isn't it, if you're lost? Adding a distance like 2 blocks makes it manageable, gives you a concrete goal for that first leg of the journey.
Like a mini objective. Do this one thing. 2 blocks.
Got it. Exactly. Reduces the mental effort. Okay, done that bit, then what?
Then the dialogue says, then turn right.
Simple enough.
But again, there's more at the big junction. And that's where the the real cleverness comes in, I think, using a landmark.
Absolutely, the landmark. Why is the big junction often so much better than saying, like, turn right onto Elm Street, especially for a stranger?
Well, a street sign, you have to spot it, read it, maybe it's hidden by a tree or something. A big junction. That's usually pretty obvious visually, right?
Precisely. You look for the thing, the visual cue. You don't have to read specific text. It taps into how we actually navigate spaces using big visible anchors.
Makes sense. It's just more robust against getting it wrong.
Mm-hmm. Less chance of error.
Okay, so straight 2 blocks, hit the big junction, turn right. How does it wrap up?
It places the destination.
Yeah.
The station will be on your left.
Essential. Tells you which way to look after you make the turn.
Yeah, you're not scanning 360 degrees.
And then one more anchor? Just behind the park?
Yes. Another visual confirmation. You see the park, you know you're there.
Yeah.
Or very close. It's that final bit of reassurance.
So the whole thing uses really simple language. Go straight, turn right on your left. But it's tied to these distances and these visible things. Blocks, junction, park.
No complicated map talk. Just clear, step-by-step, visually grounded instructions.
So taking this little source, this tiny dialogue, what's the takeaway for you listening?
Well, it shows giving good directions isn't really about, reciting a map.
Right. It's about breaking the journey down. Small steps. Actionable steps.
And crucially, anchoring those steps to things people can actually see.
Yeah. Practicing giving directions, like in that role play, even just in your head, can build real confidence. It makes it less about memory and more about guiding someone through what they're physically experiencing.
You end up giving directions that work for a human brain, not just on paper. Directions people can actually follow easily.
So here's something to think about. Why are those concrete landmarks, the big junction, the park, so much more powerful for finding your way compared to just abstract names on a sign?
And how does that act of chunking, breaking a route into, say, 2 blocks here, then a turn there, fundamentally change how easy it is to process and follow?
Something to mull over next time you're lost, or helping someone else find their way.
Okay, let's unpack this. So imagine someone's trying to meet you, right? Maybe you're home, maybe swing over by the office, and you get to tell them exactly how to find you. Seems simple enough, but, well, getting lost is just frustrating for everyone. And actually, we got some source material from a listener diving right into this exact thing, the art of clearly describing where you are. So our mission today in this deep dive is basically to slice through that material, find the best, most actionable bits so you can make sure anyone finds their way, without a hitch.
Yeah, and it's more than just convenience, isn't it? Think about the mental effort you save the other person when you give them directions that actually work. It's sort of about building trust, making that first interaction smooth right from the get-go. So, yeah, this deep dive is all about getting straight to what the source says really works, the techniques.
Okay, so the source, it jumps right in with some practical examples, shows what good description looks like. For a house, it suggests something pretty straightforward but useful, like, my house is near a green park, it's in a red building with a black gate. Simple.
Clear visual cues.
And then for an office, another clear one. The office is on the 3rd floor of the Blue Tower, next to the metro station.
Right. Location and a landmark.
And straight after these, the source just lays out the core idea, the kind of golden rule here. Be specific. Mention floor numbers, colors, nearby places. It helps. It really hits home that, these details aren't random. That's where the power is.
Exactly. And what's really interesting is the psychology behind why that works so well. When you say red building or black gate, you're giving someone a visual anchor, a real thing to look for.
Right, not just map coordinates.
Precisely. You're providing tangible cues they can spot in the real world. The source is kind of implicitly saying you help them build a mental map before they even get close.
Yeah, a mini map in their head.
And landmarks near Green Park, next to the metro station, that's a massive shortcut. These are often well-known points, much easier to find than, say, squinting at building numbers on a long street.
Oh, definitely. Think about just Elm Street versus
Elm Street, the house with the big oak tree across from the post office. Totally different experience.
Exactly. One's abstract, the other gives you, visual breadcrumbs.
And the source highlights that because it just drastically cuts down the confusion, cuts down on those, awkward, think I'm here, maybe, phone calls.
Totally. So pulling it all together from our source material, what's the main takeaway? It seems pretty clear. When you need to guide someone, home or office, specificity is, well, it's your best friend.
Absolutely. Don't be shy with those concrete details.
Yeah, the building color, the floor number, maybe a distinctive gate, like in the example, and definitely any clear landmarks nearby, things someone can actually see.
It gives them confirmation points. Ah, yes, the red building. Okay, black gate, I'm here.
Right. It makes them feel confident they're in the right spot.
So maybe something for you, the listener, to think about as you go about your day. How does this idea, the power of specific vivid details for a physical place, how does that translate when you're trying to explain something abstract, like an idea or maybe a complex process?
Good question.
What happens, what are the sort of hidden costs, maybe in understanding or connection, when we rely on being vague, whether we're pointing to a front door or trying to share a new concept, something to mull over?
Pretty fundamental for getting around and, explaining things. Directions and locations.
Right. And our source material for this dive really focuses on a set of tools that seem simple but are incredibly powerful, these helpful English prepositions.
Yeah, and what's really interesting, which the source points out, is just how much clarity, how much accuracy really hangs on these tiny words.
Exactly. So our mission here is just to quickly pull out the key insights. Why do these little words make such a difference? It's more than just knowing the definition. It's about the impact.
Totally. Forget thinking of them as just, basic vocab. The source we're digging into argues they're critical. They decide if someone finds what they're looking for or gets, completely lost. So let's see how the source breaks it down. It starts with some specific examples, doesn't it?
It does. The material really stresses that context is key. And prepositions, they give you that spatial context almost instantly. Take in. The source uses that classic example. The bag is in the car. Simple.
Yeah.
Right. But the source points out, immediately tells you it's contained. The bag isn't like on the roof or next to the door.
It's inside, within the boundaries.
Exactly. That one word just cuts out loads of possibilities, directs your search.
Precisely. And contrast that with on. The source gives us the book is on the table. That highlights contact with the surface.
So on tells you it's resting directly on top, exposed, accessible, not inside something, not underneath it.
Yeah, and that distinction just from one word is crucial if you want to find something quickly.
Makes sense?
And then you have under. The source uses the phone is under the pillow. This clearly points to a position below something else, often hidden, maybe covered.
Which totally changes where you'd look, doesn't it? Searching on the pillow versus under it, completely different actions.
Exactly. And the source uses these simple examples just to show how instantly the meaning shifts.
Right. Then it brings in relationships between things, the example was the hotel's between the cafe and the bank. And this is just invaluable for directions, isn't it? Between anchors the location relative to two other known points.
Ah, okay. So it gives you a mental bracket.
Kind of, yeah. It's within that specific space. It narrows the search area down dramatically. The source really hammers this point for giving efficient directions.
Good point. And finally, there was near, the example. The school is near my house.
Yeah, and the insight there, according to the source, is that near trades maybe absolute precision for just useful proximity. It tells you it's close enough to be relevant in the general area.
So less exact than between, maybe,
Yeah.
but still useful for context.
Absolutely. The source argues it's essential for giving context in, say, a neighborhood, guiding someone generally even without the exact street number. It defines a kind of search radius.
Okay, so here's where it gets really interesting, and this is a core message from the source material we looked at. These words seem small, but they carry, immense weight for accuracy. Think about the keys are in the drawer versus on the drawer versus under the drawer. Like those source examples showed, each one paints a totally different picture in your head.
Absolutely. The material really emphasizes that getting these prepositions right isn't just about sounding correct grammar-wise. It's about stopping confusion, saving time.
Making sure people actually understand where something is.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That the spatial info you give is interpreted just as you intend. They're sort of the bedrock for clear descriptions.
So thinking about you, our listener, what does this mean? Well, whether you're trying to guide someone to that great coffee place or just tell someone where you left your phone or even follow directions yourself.
Understanding the subtle but really powerful impact of these prepositions is just fundamental.
They're your tools for building accurate mental maps, really.
Right. Precision with these basic spatial words lets you communicate location effectively. It just cuts down on ambiguity in everyday life.
So here's something to think about, stemming from the source's focus on their impact. If just changing one tiny word, swapping in for on or between for near, completely changes the location in someone's mind.
Yeah.
How much of our ability to connect, to find things, to navigate the physical world really hinges on just these few simple linguistic hooks. Makes you think, doesn't it? We're getting really practical, actually. We're looking at giving and understanding directions in English.
Yeah, it sounds simple, but it's fundamental, isn't it? Helping someone find their way or finding your own way.
Absolutely. And we've got some source material here that focuses on some, well, really specific, simple phrases that are just incredibly useful. So our mission today, we want to pull out the key bits from these phrases, those sort of linguistic signposts, to help you feel more confident, whether you're guiding someone or trying to follow directions yourself.
Makes sense. Where should we start?
Okay, let's look at the first set. Our source highlights things like turn left at the signal.
Right.
And go straight until you see the market. What jumps out about these types of phrases?
Well, what's striking is their efficiency. You know, each one gives you a very clear action.
Like turn left or go straight.
Exactly. And then it immediately links that action to a specific reference point, a landmark.
Oh, okay. So the signal, the market, things you can actually spot.
Precisely. It's visual. It tells you what to do and when or where to do it based on something concrete you'll see. It's a very basic but crucial building block for clear directions.
So it avoids confusion. You're not asking someone to guess distances. You're saying, look for this thing, then do this.
Exactly right. Especially for, language learners maybe. Relying on visible landmarks is much easier than estimating 50 meters or remembering complex street names.
Less mental effort. Just see the thing, do the action.
That's it. Action plus landmark. That's your foundation.
Okay, so that gets someone moving, heading the right way, using those cues. But what about pinpointing the final spot, the actual destination?
Yeah.
That's often about where it is relative to other things, right?
Yeah.
The source brings up phrases like, it's across from the temple, or the restaurant is next to the bank.
Right. And notice the key words there. Across from, next to. These are prepositions.
Little words doing big work.
They really are. They describe spatial relationships. They paint a picture of where your destination sits compared to other known objects nearby.
So it's not about the journey anymore. It's about the immediate surroundings once you're close.
Exactly. You're giving context for that final location, like finding coordinates on a map, but using buildings.
Find the bank, and the restaurant is right there.
Okay.
So you combine the two types.
Yeah.
The action landmark phrases guide the journey.
Turn left at the signal.
And then these prepositional phrases help you zero in at the end. It's next to the bank. You've covered most bases that way.
Now, the source gives some really solid practical advice here. It says basically, practice these lines. Say them out loud.
Active practice, yeah.
But more than that, try to apply them. Explain how to get to your own home, but only using these kinds of simple action, landmark, and relational phrases.
And that's such a great tip because it forces you to internalize the structure, doesn't it?
Well, you take a route you know instinctively, maybe one you walk every day, and you break it down into these simple English commands and descriptions.
So you're translating your physical knowledge into these specific linguistic patterns.
Precisely. It makes it much, much easier to actually produce those phrases when you need them in a real situation, maybe when you're a bit stressed or in a hurry. It connects knowing the words to actually using them.
Right. So thinking about the listener, why does mastering this seemingly basic skill actually matter? It feels small, maybe.
But it's not, is it? It's about confidence.
Confidence in navigating.
Yes, navigating new places, interacting with people effectively, whether you're traveling or just helping a tourist in your own city. It's about feeling capable in your environment. It's quite fundamental to how we interact with the physical world.
A key interaction skill, really.
Definitely. And it makes me think, if guiding someone physically from A to B relies so heavily on breaking things down into these simple actions, clear landmarks, and relative positions, what does that suggest about communication more broadly? You know, when we're trying to guide someone's thinking, whether it's explaining an idea or a process or teaching something new, what are the essential landmarks and actions we need to provide so others can follow our train of thought and, well, arrive at understanding?
We all do, right? Helping people find their way.
Giving directions, yeah. Explaining where things are.
Seems pretty straightforward. But the source material we looked at adds this really interesting layer. It talks about how in, well, many cultures, how polite you are when you do it. It says a lot. It's really valued.
Yeah, the source really zeroes in on that. It's not just, being nice for the sake of it. It suggests politeness is actually crucial
Yeah.
for trust, for showing you're approachable.
Right, because if someone's lost, they're maybe feeling a bit vulnerable already.
Exactly. And the source argues that your language, right off the bat, it signals if you're someone, well, safe to rely on in that moment.
That makes total sense. You don't want someone shouting confusing directions if you're already turned around.
Okay.
So, okay, our mission here is to unpack why the source thinks this politeness is so vital.
Mm-hmm.
And really importantly, what specific language does it actually suggest using? Why does adding that bit of courtesy, make such a difference?
Well, the source connects it straight to kindness, to genuinely wanting to assist. It's suggesting it's less about just the raw information.
And more the human connection.
Precisely. It's like your phrasing shows your attitude. Are you bothered by the interruption, or are you actually, happy to help guide them?
And the source gives actual examples, which is helpful. It doesn't just leave it abstract.
No, it gets quite specific, like starting with, excuse me.
Even though they asked you.
Right. The source suggests that little phrase kind of sets a tone of mutual respect right from the start. It acknowledges their situation politely.
Okay, interesting. It sort of levels the interaction. What else?
Confirming you're willing. The source highlights saying something like, I'm happy to help.
Oh, okay.
It argues that shifts it. It's not just a transaction anymore, give me information. It becomes a genuine offer.
Yeah.
And that, the source says, reads as kindness.
Yeah, I can see that. It reframes you not as inconvenienced, but as someone actively helping. What about when you don't actually know the answer for sure?
That's covered too, which is important. You don't want to send someone off confidently in the wrong direction.
No, that's definitely not helpful.
So the source suggests honesty, but still polite. Phrases like, I'm not sure, but I think it might be. Or, perhaps it's over that way.
Right.
According to the source, that's another kind of politeness. Being considerate enough not to guess wildly. It builds trust, actually, through being authentic about what you know.
Trust again.
Yeah.
Yeah, that seems central. And there was one more practical example the source gave.
Oh, yeah, the map one. Here, let me show you on the map. The source sees that as going the extra step. It's not just practical, it signals like generosity.
Yeah.
A real commitment to helping them get there. It really embodies that approachable, helpful spirit.
Okay, so pulling all this together, the main idea from the source seems to be that using these specific polite phrases works because they aren't just words.
Right, they're signals.
Signals that you're kind, you're honest, you're approachable. That's what people pick up on, according to the source. It turns a simple request into something more positive, more reassuring, especially when someone's feeling lost.
Exactly. The source really emphasizes that your language choices reflect your intent in that moment. So by consciously using things like, excuse me, or I'm happy to help, or admitting when you're not sure.
Or pulling out the map.
Yeah, you're actively demonstrating that kindness and approachability the source talks about, making the help actually feel helpful.
And you can really see how incorporating these kinds of phrases could make your own interactions, more positive when you're guiding someone. It's a small change in language maybe, but it sounds like it has a big impact.
Which definitely leaves you thinking.
That brings us to the end of episode 47 of SpeakNest English Podcast Zone. You've learned how to give directions and describe locations in English clearly. In the next episode, we'll learn how to talk about hobbies and free time activities, a fun way to connect with people from all over the world. Until then, keep practicing, stay confident, and remember, you are one step closer to speaking English like a pro. Goodbye, friends.